How does your product use or challenge conventions, and how does it represent social groups or issues? My group's idea revolves around a girl that grew up in a toxic household with parents that would not play with her when she was younger. Because of this, she's always felt jealous of families with good relationships. As a result, she targets those happy families, kills them, and then sets them up at tea parties in an attempt to regain her childhood back. The film could be categorized into the horror thriller genre due to the gore and shock factor involved in the film. Our film is similar to Eden Lake, Open House, and Seven. This is due to the gore within the films and the shock factor of what happens to the characters. There are many different types of shots used within film, one being using handheld cameras. This can build a lot of suspense as it makes the viewer feel more involved in the film, and it makes the film feel more realistic, making the film more frightening overall. High-angled shots and bird's-eye view shots are often used to make characters appear powerless and vulnerable. Tilted shots are also commonly used within the horror genre, and these can add tension and insinuate that there is a supernatural being around. Low-angled shots can emphasize how scary and intimidating a villain can be. Handheld camera work is often used in found footage horror films, such as The Blair Witch Project and Cloverfield. This technique is often used to show the victim's fear as they try to escape the killer or the villain of the film. This would not apply to our film, as the victims are dead when we first see them. Handheld camera work often makes a killer seem sloppy and unplanned. However, our killer appears to be a perfectionist who has to have everything go their way. And I think by using the handheld camera approach, it wouldn't make her murders appear as planned out as they were. We used a lot of focus pulls within our sequence that can be common within horror and thrillers, when showing a killer or revealing something to the audience that wasn't known before. We also involved close-ups of the slit throats and injuries our dead bodies had. Typically, horror and thriller films are set within dark rural locations and likely somewhere deserted, where other people will not be. Being in an abandoned and isolated place creates mystery and suspicion throughout the whole film. Gothic horrors will often be set in places such as graveyards and castles. Props used within the films are often weapons that would create a slow and painful death, such as knives and chainsaws. The more violent the weapon, the better the audience reaction. The way the killer set up her scene was to mimic her idea of the perfect tea party. I think by using a lighter room with lighter, more unconventional colours, it made the set creepier as it appears as though she is hiding in plain sight. The set also shows what her idea of a perfect family is, or sitting round a table with perfect cakes and tablecloths. This contradicts usual family scenes in homes and horror films, as they are shown to be dark and usually cluttered in films such as Hereditary. Our main character was dressed in pastel colours that alluded to the idea that she never fully grew up due to her upbringing and family situation. She was made to look childish. We also made sure to include light colours and pastels within the cakes and set design to show that this is her place and her performance to herself. There were red curtains against the windows that helped give the set a more eerie atmosphere, and it complemented the other colours nicely. Most of the time in horror films, music is used to subconsciously remind the audience of primordial times. This can be done with non-linear sounds like violins that can mimic the sound of animals in distress. Many themes contain strong heartbeat sounds within them that can cause adrenaline to build up and can tap into audiences' fight or flight instincts. Although we did not use dialogue in our opening sequence, the sound added helped to create the atmosphere we wanted to portray through music and diegetic sound. For our music, we took a children's lullaby, Baa Baa Black Sheep, as a base for our soundtrack. We took the song and changed the pitch and added drones to create an atmosphere of tension and horror. Suspense and tension is built in horror movies through editing a lot of the time. This can be done in different ways, but most commonly used techniques such as fast-paced editing. This can be used to disorientate the audience. It makes the audience believe there is a sense of urgency. However, longer uncut clips can be used to grow suspense as well, as it makes the audience more aware of what's happening and helps them to see things they may not have seen when the fast-paced editing is being used. In our sequence, we used two main editing techniques, one being action-packed shots throughout the sequence, such as when she picks up the cakes and as she walks around the table to each dead body. This creates a sense of realism for the audience, which makes the movie feel creepier and more realistic, and the other being fast-paced editing to build tension and make the audience worry about what they might see next. We had 4 characters in our opening sequence, 3 of them being dead, all from the same family, one mother, one father, and their daughter. They are all white and look reasonably wealthy due to their costumes, the main character being the killer, Polly, a young female around her early 20s that is obsessed with having a childlike persona. Our main character is a female killer, which is untypical for the horror and thriller genres. This is because women are usually perceived as weak and vulnerable. Two of the dead bodies are women, which is stereotypical for the horror genre. However, one of the victims is a middle-aged man, which is untypical as men are usually either the killer or the savior of the film. Horror films often include different stereotypes of victims. For example, many films include a stoner, a jock, a nosy person, and cops. However, we used a family of three, a father, a mother, and a daughter as our victims. Our victims appear to be innocent due to their light-coloured clothes. Our victims don't directly relate to horror stereotypes, however this can make the film more scary as audience see regular people as the victims and not just the usual stereotypes. The killer in our sequence is a young female. This is very unconventional for horror and thriller films. This is because a large majority of horror audiences are male and they typically prefer to watch females be killed and be the victims rather than men. Our victims consist of one male and two females. This is common in horror to have a mix of both female and male characters as victims. However, the age is not so typical as victims very often consist of teenagers and young adults, and two of our victims are shown to be older as the parents of the youngest victim.